I definitely don't have anywhere near the amount of experience as most of you probably have. And I've only got 10 minutes, so I'm going to try to keep it as interesting as possible from my perspective, but I appreciate some of you may not be interested in what is my favourite subject, which is sustainability. But I think with the experience in the room, probably quite a lot of you are for different reasons. That's not supposed to skip, sorry. Firstly, by show of hands, who here is a business owner? First, and then hands up if you know as a business owner, or if your company, if you know your revenue as a company. Hands up if you know your salary that you get paid, whether you're a business owner or employed. There's some people who don't know how much they get paid. Didn't want to raise their hands. Okay. Hands up if you know your carbon footprint. Hands up if you know your company's carbon footprint. 0. So for the next couple of minutes, all I really want to talk to you is kind of the relationship between money and carbon and the role that we all have in this room. I see a lot of people looking quite sceptical already, which is completely understandable. But with people like Alan here, who spent a lifetime dedicated to our industry, focusing on this kind of equipment, so much of it is actually ingrained in the kind of work that you've dedicated your life to. But often we're kind of that kind of grey area when people talk about sustainability in construction. People think about these big green, expensive buildings and how flashy it is and lights and all this kind of eco stuff. But actually, what we do is really the cornerstone of sustainability. I'm hoping this is going to go through why. There was a JLL report out just this year, which basically went through kind of the premium associated to green property, and all of that is around decarbonisation, electrification, energy efficiency. There's other kind of eco elements to it as well, but most green buildings now, the report did quantify for New Zealand, that there's a premium attached to properties which are sold or rented, dependent upon if they have neighbours or Green Star or any of these kind of remits. With Green Star and with a HVAC system, I don't know how familiar any of you are with Green Star specifically, but within the commercial sector, there's a load of different categories how you can get credits to try to get a Green Star project across the line. Within HVAC systems, we can control and influence about 5 of those categories. Not completely, but different sections within that. So the expertise in this room can account for about a third of an overall Green Star project, which can have a huge influence in terms of the opportunity that you can add, that we can all be adding in terms of value to not just our clients and developers and tenants, but also in terms of helping us decarbonise the country. So that's kind of the money aspect. That's what's important to most of us in terms of our business and why we're talking about these kind of conversations. What about at home? There's some stats there that are quite interesting in terms of, again, the value and cost associated to green buildings. A lot of people assume that to build a green property, it's going to cost a hell of a lot more money. There was a recent study that came out just last year by Oricon with Quanto, who are QS, and they basically ascertained that to build a new home as per building regs and kind of minimum compliance versus to design it to Green Star, to NZGDC's Home Star certification at level 6, which is kind of the highest you can get. It was a maximum of about 1.3% cost uplift, very marginal. And when you consider that actually a lot of homes across New Zealand, across both islands, are currently poor performing in terms of energy efficiency, leaving a lot of people in energy hardship. We understand that actually there's a real need for us as an industry to work with the developers and work with our supply chain to help build better quality and advise on the importance of energy efficiency, especially when it comes to things like heat pumps or ventilation systems. Sorry, I've got a note on my phone. My phone's doing a classic thing where it doesn't turn. In 2019, there's a report that came out from the NZ Household Economic Survey showing that the poorest 10% of households spent 15% of their income on, after mortgage payments, etc., on energy. 15% of your overall salary, that's huge. Whereas the wealthiest 10% in comparison were only spending less than 2% of their income on energy. Highlighting that the people who are suffering the most in terms of energy hardship within the New Zealand economy are those who sit probably on the lower socio-economic levels And that's an opportunity where we as an industry can come together and support people across the industry, but also across New Zealand. Why is it quite important for our sector to kind of play a role in this? Most of you probably already know, but as a construction sector and the wider building sector, we contribute to 6.3% of New Zealand's GDP. We employ about 11% of the country's total workforce. And so we're the third largest employer section within New Zealand. That's huge, and that's including everyone in this room, and then all of the clients and those within the supply chain that you work with. There's security in our jobs, and there's security in what the future looks like as we talk about decarbonisation, reducing emissions across the country. Some of the breakdown of the different sectors that are available actually demonstrate that kind of tradespeople sit as kind of the highest proportion of percentage of jobs that are required to fill the gap within the construction industry. So very much the people sat in this room, the people we work with, the people we look to employ. There has been a growing trend in terms of the amount of people coming into the industry. Significantly less females working in this industry, which I think we can all expect, which we probably all expected. But there is not a skills gap, but there's an employee shortage in terms of the jobs that are needed and the amount of people coming into the industry. So that also means that for those of you in the room who have years and years worth of experience, we all have the benefit of learning and growing from that skill set and passing that on to future generations. In commercial buildings, there's a ton of stuff that can be done to upgrade existing buildings, but also to advise our clients and kind of add value to what future buildings look like in terms of new developments. The same can be said for the residential sector as well. But aside from there's a whole checklist which is available, which is put together by EPA and FMA and Z, which I really recommend you look through, but it's probably all of the stuff that you are all advising to your clients already on. But one thing that I found really interesting was within their energy efficiency checklist, they also provided a heap of information for like low-cost education opportunities. And this is where at the moment where we are going through a really tough financial time. I appreciate that, especially for SME businesses. It is not easy at the moment, and it definitely hasn't been for the last few years. But this is the opportunity where we can all add value to our clients and prospective clients and tenants and users of our systems in terms of giving them advice and free upgrades to what they can do to their systems and help protect them against kind of energy poverty. Interestingly, it's worth stating that with green buildings, although green buildings seem quite flaky and who's really that interested, does it really matter? From 2020 to 2021, there's a 35% increase in the amount of new green buildings that were registered. That's across commercial and residential sector. And then from 2021 to 2022, there's a 54% increase. So we are seeing a rise in demand in the take-up of green building schemes across commercial and domestic. And that's without we even start talking about kind of what it sits within the government regulation and compliance, because at the moment, minimum standards sit where they are, and the current government isn't necessarily looking to grow that drastically, although they was talking about the climate change programme. So there's still all these voluntary schemes, and they are growing in demand, which means that there's more demand for these schemes, which means there's more demand for your services and your skill sets. So last slide, going back to that 20%, which is on the first slide, I asked you what your carbon footprints were, I asked you what your salaries were, and where that all fits in. As an industry, we are responsible for 20% of New Zealand's greenhouse gas emissions, which is pretty significant. Refrigerants alone, I mean, you spoke about all of the different refrigerants that you've seen throughout your lifetime and how we're moving towards lower GWP, which is pretty interesting. But HFCs, or refrigerants and F-gases in the wider sense, are responsible for 2% of New Zealand's emissions. So we collectively as an industry, we've got the expertise to really support the government and the people in reducing those emissions, but we've also got job prosperity and job security. It may not seem like it's really easy at the moment, and it isn't, but there is a pipeline of work, or there's a pipeline of security and new people that we need to train up and get into the industry. Effectively for us to deliver better buildings for Kiwis in the homes and in the commercial sector. This is for us all to come together and collaborate and help. So yeah, I just want to say that's short. I appreciate it may not be the type of presentation you're necessarily expecting, but we would love to kind of collaborate with anyone who's got any ideas or suggestions or innovative ideas on what we can do as an industry to really help impact that 20%. Thank you very much.